Hello, my name's Ben Brain, and in this video lesson I'm going to show you how you can create a surreal montage just like the one you can see here. Firstly, we're going to learn how to extract our model from the makeshift home studio background that we've got here using the Refine Edge tool in Photoshop CS5. We've got a regular seascape as our background here, and we're going to translocate our model into that, add a shadow, a reflection, to make it seem convincing. We're going to learn how to blend the parasol with the background. Then we're going to create a surreal cube emerging out of the sea just to give that edge to this fantastical landscape. And then we're going to add some tweaks to the tones and the colors and add a little bit of a sepia tint. Okay, so let's get started and double click on our model shot here. You can find this file also called montage.01_before. So let's click on this image here and we shall open in CS5. First of all, just to get rid of some of the unnecessary information in the background and make our stripping out a little bit easier, let's choose the crop tool from the tools palette on the left hand side over here. Let's just mark out our area, just leaving us with a nice clean background. Double click inside this area, hit return, or the tick mark over here just to commit our crop. I'm just going to press Control and the plus key just to zoom in a little bit so our image is a little bit bigger, and the space bar just to grab around the image. Now to make our selection, I'm going to go over to the quick selection tool from the tools palette, and I'm just going to very crudely mark out the area of our model here. Now you can just see it's being relatively intelligent, and there we go. You can see our model is selected there. Now this will be a fairly crude selection, so what we're going to do to refine that is go to the Refine Edge tool, which you can see up here, and this is a brilliant feature to help you make good clean extractions. And click on that and the Refine Edge dialog window opens up. So let's have a quick look at some of the options that we've got here. First we've got the view mode, and let's just go through a couple of these, and you can just, it makes it easier to work on. Sometimes if you see it's on black, it makes it a little bit easier, and you can see here we can get some clarity to where our extraction's made. Black on white, on layers, overlay. There's no right or wrong way, it's just what works best for the specific image that you're working on. I kind of like on layers for this image, and so I'm just going to keep it on that. Now we're not going to worry about extracting in the parasol here because we'll deal with that a little bit later on with some blending modes. So we're just going to keep the extraction around the parasol and of course the figure here. So first of all, we want to go down to the edge detection, and a good idea just to hit the smart radius and keep that checked. You can alter the amount of pixels here. Let's probably just put in 2 pixels just to start with. And then we have the adjust edge, which you'll probably be familiar with some of these, the smooth, feather, contrast, and the shift edge. For this exercise, I'm just going to put in 25% contrast. Then you've got the output here, decontaminate colors. This is a good box to check, especially if you have been shooting in an environment where there's been color spill onto your subject. Green screen would be a perfect example of this, where you might see some green reflecting from your studio background into the shadow areas of your subject. This is not really the case with this image because we shot against a white, but we can check it anyway just to make sure. And we have our output selections, which we'll discuss once we've made our extraction. Okay, so let's go and let's just zoom in a little bit on our image, and I'll just show you. Let's zoom into a typically tricky area like this bit of hair here. And as you can see, we've got a fairly crude extraction there. So what we're going to go and do is go back to the edge detection and just make sure we're on the Refine Radius tool, and then we're just going to paint over on the background. Can you just see what's happening? A bit of the hair is coming back, and let's just let go and just see what happens. And you can see how that is just really refined that edge. So what I'm going to do is we can just go around and just see, I'm just painting on the background and it's just getting a little bit crisper. Great. See what happens just in here with this bit of hair, and you see a bit of the checkerboard just coming through there, and we're getting a really nice detailed extraction. So we can just go around and just make sure that everything is nice and tight. We might get rid of this little bit of black at some stage later on in the process anyway, but for the time being, let's just keep it in. I'm going to go around the whole of our figure here and just make a good extraction. So I'm going to put this recording on pause while I just finish that off and join you in 2 ticks. So I've been around now and refined the selection using the Refine Radius tool. Incidentally, there's also the Erase Refinements tool, which is good for taking away from the extraction. You can access that by just simply using the Alt key. Now we're ready to just remove our extraction. So let's go to Output 2 and let's go down to New Document. You've got a number of options here. None of them are neither more right or wrong than the other, but for this purpose we're going to use the New Document. So just click that, so that's set there, and then just click OK. And now you can see that our model is extracted into a new document on a new layer with a checkerboard background so that we can use that. And at this stage it's a great idea to just save your extraction so that you can always use it and come back to it for future projects. So let's just put that there, save it back to our original new folder, and we can always use that should we want to use it again in a project in the future. So now we're ready to move our model into the background. So let's go up to Mini Bridge, and we get this really useful little mini bridge opening in its own little window inside Photoshop. So let's just scroll through to find our background image, montage 02_before, if you're following this tutorial with our images, and double click and it opens up in Photoshop. Let's get rid of that so we've got a nice clear workspace and go back to our main image. Let's just go to Select All and Edit Copy, just to make a copy of that selection, and return to our background. We can go to Edit Paste and we paste her in. Okay, as you can see, she's not looking all that realistic at the moment. So let's just go to Edit, Transform, and Scale. And now you can see we can scale our model using these little grabbers on the corner. Now what I'm going to do is just keep my finger on the Shift button, and that will keep the rotation in proportion so that she's in scale. If I let go, you can see we can do all sorts of nasty things. And so it's good to just keep your finger just on the Shift, and it just keeps everything in scale. So we're going to position her just about over here. Perhaps even just a little bit smaller there. That's about the right position. She's a bit of a funny angle, so let's just type in up here. Let's do about -2 degrees just to straighten things up a little bit. Now just a quick double click inside, or a commit transform over here, and we're all set. And you can see that she's been created on her new own layer here with a checkerboard background, so it's just this little area here. Okay, so now let's set about making a convincing reflection and blending the parasol in with the background. First thing we're going to do is just tackle the parasol. So let's zoom in so that we've got a nice good look, just using the Control and plus and minus keys to change the size, and the space bar to just grab around the image. Now what we want to do here is to just get a sense of the sky coming through, and by doing an extraction and making a hole in all these little areas here, it just wouldn't look convincing. It wouldn't feel like the sky was being shown through lace. It would have just looked very unrealistic. So to make it look realistic, let's just get that nice and big. Let's just move this layers palette just a little bit to the side. Now first of all, we're going to just duplicate our layer there, so we can just do that by dragging it into the new layer. Now best practice means we should be really renaming our layers, so let's call this parasol, and then we're just going to go back to this layer. Bear with me on this. We're going to change the blending mode to multiply. So let me just hide that, and you can see what's happening here, and that's blending this layer here and the background layer together. Now obviously we don't want our image to look like that, but we do in the parasol, because you can see how well the sky just comes through and really gives that sense that it's coming, the sky is being seen through the lace. So let's just go back here, and let's go down to this little fellow here to create a layer mask. In fact, let's undo that, and let's get onto that layer and create a layer mask. And now we just need to select a black brush from our foreground color. Zoom in a little bit more. Probably don't want that brush shape. Let's go for a big soft brush. Maybe that's a little bit too big. Maybe that's a little bit too big. Let's go with that. And you can just see as I start painting over here, we're just getting the sky coming through, and it is looking really convincing. We don't need to go all the way up there, although we can do just to give it a bit of dark depth. Take a bit of the colour out. What's the most important bit is just these bits here, so you really get a sense of the sky coming through. Square left-hand square bracket just to make the brush a little bit smaller. Bit of sky just coming through here, and we can just go fairly. We don't need to be a bit of cloud there anyway, so it just looks like it's coming through. So you get the basic principles there. We can tidy it up. We can just switch to a white brush, make it slightly smaller, and just go back over some of these little areas that we've gone over. I think these are probably clone out later on anyway, so let's not waste too much time there. We can just sort of tidy up any little bits, so we can just get a very convincing sensation of the sky. Oops, let's just go back. Let's just get that again. There we go. Black, and gone over that. There we go. So let's just zoom out, and then you can see where our mask has been made, and it just gets a really convincing sensation of the sky coming through the lace. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is to just create a reflection so that our model looks a little bit more convincing rather than just floating above the sea here. So first things, let's just create another layer, and it's a duplicate of this layer. So let's just drag that down and onto that icon, and we got another layer. We don't really need the icon again, the mask again, but it's not a big deal. So let's just relabel that reflection, and let's go up to create our reflection. So actually we are going to go down to free transform again, but this time we're going to go to flip vertical, and there you can see our model has flipped. And then we're just going to select the V for the move tool, and then we're just going to relocate our model down here. Don't worry that she's going all the way off. Now flip vertical is much better than rotate 180 degrees, because you can see that the reflection is marrying up. So we're going to do that, drop it in just about there. Now don't worry about that overlap, because we'll get rid of that in just 2 ticks. Okay, so that's looking good. Let's go and make sure our layer mask is now highlighted, and let's select the gradient tool and black brush, and let's just mark out, oops, wrong way. You can see what I'm doing here is just adding a gradient, and you can see that best illustrated on the layer mask over here, and that's just helping to create that reflection there. So you can see you can just try a couple of different ways, and you get different effects. It's a little bit of trial and error, but I think that's looking quite convincing. So now what I'm going to do is actually just go back here, and we're just going to reduce the opacity a little bit as well. So it should be a little bit darker. So let's just do that down to about, let's say about 69%. That should be fine. and you also get a little bit of the water coming through. I'm going to go down to the background layer, and I'm just going to add a new layer here. So it's just coming in, and let's just call that shadow. And this time I'm just going to select the brush tool. Let's just use these square brackets to just make our brush a little bit bigger. Whoops. And I'm just going to paint just a little bit on here, just to cast a little bit of a shadow. And again, I'm just going to use the opacity slider to just make that a bit darker. And then you can see that already our model is beginning to look convincingly located on the sea. Let's go back to this layer, and let's just select the burn tool. Just going to right hand square bracket, just make it a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to burn this in just a little bit too. Just getting exposure a bit higher than 6%. It's not really doing very much. And there you go. Just so it's, I think that's looking pretty convincing. So it's got a nice, really nice little reflection there. And you can see that we're now building a nice convincing blending with the background, with the parasol and the reflection and the shadow, and it's all beginning to hang together quite well. So now we're ready to create our surreal cubes emerging out of the sea in our background. Let's go to the background layer, select the rectangular marquee tool from the tools palette on the left hand side, and let's mark out the left hand side of our cube. Let's go to about there. And now we want to just use the keyboard shortcut Control-C to copy that selection. Move to the top of our layers palette and use the keyboard shortcut Control-V to paste into that, and you can see that's created a new layer. One more keyboard shortcut, Control-L, to bring up the levels window. And now I'm going to grab the midpoint slider and just move that a little bit to the right, and you can see that our selection is becoming a little bit darker. We probably just want it about there, and let's click OK. Now, let's go and skew some perspective with the transform tool. So edit, transform, and this time we're going to use the perspective. And you can see now I've got the grabbers on the corners and sides of this selection. So let's grab the left-hand side and we can pull it down. You can see you can do this in a number of different ways to skew the perspective whichever way you want. This is a surreal montage, so we have carte blanche to go whichever way we want, really. Let's just bring that middle slider down a little bit so that it's getting the horizons in line, and I think that's looking pretty good. So we can just double click to commit our transform there. Let's just do the same again for the right hand side. So back to the background, rectangular marquee tool still selected. Let's mark out our area here. Let's just shimmy that a bit to the right and copy and paste. Control C, and back to the top of the layer stack, Control V to paste, and Control L to bring up the levels dialog window again and make it darker, but not quite as dark, so we've still got a bit of a line. You can see just a little bit of a gap there, so I'm going to just grab the move tool, and that's looking a little bit better. Let's just grab it one more time, just push it a little bit up there. That's good. Edit, transform again, perspective. This time we just bring the right hand side down a little bit so that we're creating the sort of second side of the cube, as it were. And double click to commit those. And then you can see we're just getting a good looking cube there. Best practice, let's call these cube left and cube right. It's not looking particularly refined at the moment, so let's add a couple of layer masks and some gradients, a little bit like we did with the reflection, so that it can start looking good. So let's go down to this little fellow here, add a layer mask. Let's do one, and let's do the other one at the same time. Select the gradient tool from the tools palette on the left hand side here. Check that our foreground color is set to black, and make sure that we've got the layer selected, and that, just like we did with the reflection, we can mark out our area there. So that's looking quite good for the left hand side. It's a little bit of trial and error just until you get it right, and then let's go to this side. There we go. I think that's looking good, and we can also just refine this with a brush as well. So let's just square up the brush there, and we just don't want it quite so hard on the horizon there. And let's go on to this one here. Possibly that was just a little bit off there, and that's looking quite good. It's just there, that's looking nice. We can always go back. I'm feeling now that we might just want to just skew the perspective a little bit more on this side. So the great thing about working in layers is, of course, that it's all editable. So if we change our mind, we can always go back and skew it again. So that's looking a bit more convincing, and I'm liking that. Okay, for the last stage in creating this, we're also going to just highlight, let's highlight both these layers by holding Shift and highlighting them both, and then we can just duplicate layers, click OK, and then we can go up and flip these as we did with the original reflection. So flip vertical, and then we have to do these one at a time. We can just move these down just to create a bit of a reflection in the sea. Let's just get these in the right position. So, and just down there. We're going to really reduce the opacity of these because we want this just to be quite subtle. So there you just get a sense that they're coming out there and reflected in the sky. Just looking pretty good. Okay, now we're getting fairly close to finishing, and you can see that our layer palette is getting nice and full there. And you can see all the various elements. For our final tweaks, it's really just a question of style. So let's go make sure we're at the top of the layers palette, and I'm just going to add a number of adjustment layers just to show you what we can do. So let's just go, first of all, I'm going to create a black and white adjustment layer, making the whole image black and white. And let's just move this over here. And then I'm going to change the blending mode to soft light. And you can see that's just given a nice overall contrast. It's taken a little bit of the color out with the black and white, but the soft light has brought it back in again, but in a slightly muted way, which I really like. Now I'm going to create one more adjustment layer, and this time I'm going to do it for photo filter, and that's just a good way of adding a tint. So I'm going to add a sepia tint, which we can just do here, and then we have a slider here where we can just vary the amount. I'm going to add another filter on top of that, and let's try yellow. And this is very subjective, and you can really do whatever you want. If you wanted a bluer tint or not, or you just want to tweak the tones or the colors, just bung a series of adjustment layers at the very top of your image. And then lastly, just for a little bit of dodging and burning, we can just do Shift, Control, Alt and the letter E, which will create a flattened version of all the layers at the top of the layer stack. And I quite like this just for a last bit of dodging and burning, so that we just do it just to get a nice sort of sense of, it's a bit too much there. We could also change that to luminosity just so we don't get any bad dodgy colors coming through. Let's probably set just a little bit crudely, and we can just sort of finally tweak our image. So there we have it, our final image. Let's get rid of the layers palette, just get it to fill the screen, and you can see we've created a nice surreal montage out of a couple of shots and a lot of transforming.